Excellent. Buenos tardes y bienvenidos a Virtuous Juneteenth, la máxima experiencia de ciencia ficción, fantasía y cultura cómica. Soy su anfitriona Kennedy Allen y hoy tengo un panel fantástico para ustedes. Good afternoon and welcome to Virtuous Juneteenth, the ultimate science fiction, fantasy, and comic culture experience. I am your host, Kennedy Allen, and today we have a fantastic panel in store for you. Sorry about the hookup, but you know how it is. Technology, right? Look at you beautiful people. Look at this.
Hello.
Look at this.
Oh my goodness.
Wilson, you don't have to adjust, honey. You're fine. You can read us the phone book and we will all be very pleased with it. Please, let me let you know. And once again, my name is Kennedy Allen. I'll be hosting this fantastic panel today. I have with us the esteemed Aliza Pearl of Internet Stardom and the one and only Wilson Cruz. That was a stage left.
Nicely done.
Intro as well. I'm very impressed. I feel very
good. Thank you.
Well done.
I've been practicing all week. Let me tell you.
It paid off. Good job.
I could have done, just so you know. So it was good.
No, lies. Lies. I find that very hard to believe. Well, welcome everybody. Happy Juneteenth weekend. How's everybody feeling? We good?
Good. Happy Juneteenth, y'all.
I've been meaning to ask, is that the proper greeting? Is it proper to say Happy Juneteenth?
I think so, yeah.
I think so. It's really up to interpretation, I would think, because we've been
I've been saying, I hope you have a good Juneteenth, or I don't know, there's something about happy about it.
Yeah.
I know.
Right. Happy finding out you were freed 2 years ago day.
Right. Happy Liberation Day. Happy late news day. Happy 2 years late and a whole bunch of dollars short. But that's a whole other ball of wax.
Don't you think it's just the height of irony that at a time when we are dealing with the effects of the big lie and all of the lies that we have endured in the past 4 years, that this was the year they decided to make a national holiday to mark one of the biggest lies ever told.
Right.
2 years in a row.
And then banning critical race theory in 15 states. You can't even talk about why today's a national holiday.
By the way, they can't even define for themselves what that is. It's just any mention of the truth about our history,
exactly.
I guess, is what's considered critical.
Exactly. So very thankful for days like Juneteenth, for places like Virtuous where we have the opportunity to see farther, and look out into the future and prepare for what's to come. And I think both of you do an excellent job of embodying that in your own way. I don't know if any of you who are watching along at home have been following the banter on Twitter, but Aliza and Wilson and I are like best friends now. I don't know. I don't know if you all need to catch up. That's fine. By all means, get your scroll on and see what has gone down. But you two are absolutely amazing. Just like a monolith. I've had a chance to do some research and dig in the crates and watch some of your things and some of your older stuff. And I'm just like, how privileged am I to get to have this conversation? Wilson, you should know that Aliza and I have been plotting on you for some time now. Okay, full disclosure, in the interest of the future, right? Honesty, transparency comes to the future.
Bring it.
We had a discussion back in February, I believe it was, during Black History Month, Aliza, where we talked about representation of Afro-Latinidad in popularized media. So television, film, theater, music, the whole shebang. And I was like, how cool would it be if we could get Wilson Cruz to talk about this? And Aliza was like, put it out into the universe. You never know. And here we are. And I just wanted to know that this is definitely premeditated and that you are safe with us. It's a safe place, I promise. So I thank you, first of all, for taking some time out of your day. I know you're busy filming Discovery presently. Is it amazing?
Yes. I mean, I feel like we've been filming season 4 of Discovery for a decade. But it's getting done. It is getting done. We're almost done. Cool.
Very, very cool. And Aliza, you have something directly after this, right? You are booked.
Not anymore. My schedule shifted, thank God.
Okay, you get a chance to breathe.
I usually have some private games on the weekends that I run.
Cool. So I mentioned this because I think out of the three of us, Wilson, Aliza is the one who has adjusted the most to filming and doing things in the house now that we've been locked down and hopefully soon to no longer be locked down. Aliza's background, as you can see, is always on point. Like all of her gaming stuff is always on point. And I mentioned this because I remember reading in one of your tweets, Wilson, how frustrated you've been with self-taping. Please tell us a little bit about that experience.
Here's the thing about the self-taping and my frustration. It's not so much that I don't enjoy doing it. It is the fact that during this COVID experience, casting directors and producers who are, asking for these self-tapes for auditions have now decided that it's totally okay to create like a list of guidelines that they need us to follow in order for it to be presentable and acceptable to them. And many of us, myself included, are making these tapes alone. And sometimes, you have to like find someone to read with you. You have to make sure that the frame is correct, that the sound, I'm an actor. I did not train in sound and cinematography. For me, what's enjoyable is the interaction I have with the other person that I'm doing the scene with, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just me, by myself. That's just masturbation as far as I'm concerned. It's like,
heavens.
Give me a break. Give me a break that I'm just going to get it to you as best as I can. And, given the circumstances that we're under, I hope and pray that it's, that they're understanding of the circumstances. So it's become a lot. It has become a whole thing. And I feel like it's taking up a lot longer of my very precious time that I'm doing for free for a job that I may not get. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's just become a whole thing.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, that list that they give you, it can also change from casting director to casting director. So I kid you not, there are some casting directors that will be like, no distractions in the background. We want to see nothing, just you, no distractions. And then others that'll be like, show us your personality in your background. Like, show us your home. We want to see, like, what's the art on your walls? And it's like, oh my God, like every single one is very different in what they ask. So you literally have
some
to,
of them are like, oh, we don't want to hear the other person.
Right. Yeah.
You want to hear it's.
Yeah. Some of them, they're like, don't be louder than your reader. Some of them are like, be equal. Some of them are like, be louder than your reader. Like, it's just crazy.
Do you have a board op to measure my levels for you to be asking for all this? Is there someone union on staff to make sure my stuff is cool? No? Then stop asking me crazy things.
Yeah.
So what are some of these? That's definitely like an obstacle, right? Being able to somehow maintain artistic integrity while doing all of this technical stuff, while in the house during a pandemic, while there's levels of civil unrest, while there's and what would you say to some folks who are in the industry now or who are looking to get in the industry, who might have to deal with like remote things going forward? What are some things that you've learned along the way? Things that you wish someone had told you before you started trying to do it this way? In this medium specifically, we'll get into breaking into the industry as a whole in just a little bit.
I mean, my first thought was just how different the audition process is from your actual job once you get it, right? So don't expect that when you get the job that you're going to get the 25 takes that you took in order to make the tape. Because you're not. You're going to get 2. So. Right. Which is also the danger for casting directors, right? Like, they're seeing all of these really amazing tapes. And when those people get to work sometimes, they're not going to be able to measure up to that performance because they're not going to have 30 takes. But anyway, I think what I would say to them is be off book as much as possible. Have it in your hand because they need to know that this isn't a fully fledged, complete performance, that you are still working things out. And I think having it in your hand is a signal of that. I have not been above being the other person I'm taping with, because sometimes you can't find somebody. So what I've gone and done is record myself on this app that I have. It's that I learn my lines with, and so it'll read back the lines, but it's less than ideal because the response is timed. So I have it doesn't allow for.
Oh, there's one app called Cold Read that actually takes your cue before it gives you the line. Check that out.
Send me that app, because that's going to change the world. I don't know. Yeah. I think the best advice is to not put so much pressure on yourself for it to be perfect, because it's a self-tape, and you have to allow for imperfection. And the fact that it's imperfect is going to allow them to understand that this isn't that there's more to you and the performance that you're going to be able to give than what's on this tape.
Makes sense.
And
would you feel the same way, Aliza?
Yeah, I do. And I would add that two things. Number one, don't forget that it's about the performance. Like, if you're super worried about the lighting and the framing and all these things, you might think that that's more important, but it's not. The work is the most important thing. So really put that time in on the work. And if you get stressed worrying about all the technical stuff, then don't worry about it. Just be like, put up a light, stand in front of a wall, and have someone on Skype, and that's it. Like, don't worry about the levels and all that stuff. And then the second thing, what was the second thing I was going to say? Well, this is more like just in general, not just about self-tapes, but in terms of like the industry, just, people of all ages find success. And yes, there are different odds for people who are younger or older or middle-aged, but I just feel like, everyone's career can be different. And also it's never a straight line. Like, no one just goes from A to B with lots of side quests and different careers and things that we've done in our lives, having kids, getting married, like all that stuff. So live your life, be an actor, but also live your life, take care of your health. And if you need to step away for a few years, like I did because of my health, you can come back. Don't listen to people who say, you're going to be too old, or you past your prime, blah, blah, blah. Because I heard all that stuff, and now I'm back and better than ever, baby. So do you take care of yourself. If you step away, the industry will still be there, and you might come back more seasoned and more lived in and have more to give to your acting.
Go off, Aliza. I was watching an episode of The Blood of the Void last night, and Commander Bamir got in her bag about something, and you would have thought that I was talking to an individual there. I was like, go off, Bamir, talk it. Talk it. I'm with it. I love everything about that, because at the end of the day, obstacles are just a chance to turn something into an opportunity, right? These are...
Can I piggyback on that a bit?
Yeah.
Is that, even in the most seemingly successful career, there are lulls. And that's just part of a career, right? So I feel like your job in those lulls is to live your life so that you have something to draw on or draw from when you do inevitably work again. Because in the end, the only instrument we use as artists, as actors, is our lived experience and ourselves and our experience. So if you're not having any, you're not going to have much to draw on. So even in my case, where I went through a bit of a lull, and I thought, well, let me go get a real job. So I did. I got a real job, and I went and worked at GLAAD, and I had a desk and an office and responsibilities and someone to answer to, and goals that I had to fulfill. And when I finished that 2-year stint that I allowed myself, when I went back and was auditioning for professionals like lawyers on 13 Reasons Why, or doctors, I had an experience to draw from, right? Of being someone who answered to someone else, who had a responsibility. So you are still working on your acting, even when you are not acting, because your life is your art.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we'd be remiss if we didn't address it. Like, working is a thing. We keep using these terms: work, industry, it's labor. We exist in a capitalistic society. So if you don't, and they have no, concern for whether or not you're rested, or whether or not you've spent time with your family, or whether or not you've had, the facial that you've wanted, or whatever the case may be, right? You have to take care of yourself and live your life for you, like the both of you have been saying, because you will not have the opportunity to if you don't create it for yourself. So I'm very glad to hear that both of you are prioritizing that. Wilson, I blinked, it was supernova, and I was like, is that my so-called boo? And then I blinked again. And you're on Discovery. So I don't know what lull you're talking about. Time is a construct and man-made at best. So that's cool. We have obstacle opportunities. I have a list here, and we all just covered so very much of it. But speaking of representation and seeing oneself reflected in the media that you consume, right? That is incredibly important. And it is important in general, but very also specifically for African diasporic people, because we are never, ever, ever depicted in a way that shows the full breadth of us, right? There's always one example here or one example there, maybe a splattering of hinting towards things, but never us in all of our fullness. Granted, there's a lot of us, so we can understand you might not have a screen big enough for all of this blackness, and that's fine. But within that, there's the intersections of blackness that aren't getting represented as well, at least not until very, very recently, where we're talking about folks who are Afro-Latine or Afro-descended Latine. And for those of you who aren't familiar what the difference is, I would like to turn it over to Aliza, because you gave me an excellent explanation when I first heard those terms. And I just wanted to give you a chance to speak on that.
Sure. Yeah. So if people don't know already, I think something like 95% of the Africans who were brought over in the transcontinental slave trade were brought to Latin America, and only 5% went to the US. And 5% was still a lot, because that's about 500,000 people who were brought over. And of course, those of us who descend from them have, proliferated. But the same thing happened in Latin America times 10 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So I think in the US, especially, everyone who is, even people within the Latin community, forget or don't realize how Black Latin America really is. And that Blackness is not perceived the same way as it is in the US. Latin America is much more complex. People identify as Latino or by their country primarily, and race is kind of secondary. Except, here's the thing. If you are a Black, undeniably, unambiguously Black person who doesn't look mixed or anything, just has strong African features, you experience life as a Black person in Latin America as well. There's still discrimination. There's police brutality towards Black bodies in Latin America, just like there are in the US. So even though in Latin America, race is seen as more of a spectrum, and there's like lots of mixing and mezcla, it's kind of a fallacy to think that race doesn't exist in Latin America as it is. And on the other side of that, there are white Latinos as well, people who have like mostly European ancestry, who move through the world as white people and who do experience the privilege of that in Latin America and also when they're in the US. And then the terms that you had asked me about before, there is a difference and an intersection between Afro-descended Latino and Black Latino. And, Afro-descended can be a lot of different people of different colors, of different features. It could mean you have 25% African DNA because you have a grandfather who's Black, but everyone else is white in your family. It could mean 50%, 70%. It can mean a lot of things. But Black Latino specifically means someone who moves through the world being perceived as a Black person and as a Black person, whether or not they identify as Black or whatever they identify as, they get treated as a Black body on this earth.
Cool. Thank you for explaining that. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's important to clearly define such things, being mindful of stuff like blood quantum, because that can get ugly and messy and it's never cool. But the intersections that you highlighted there, I think are very, very important, particularly for folks who exist outside of Latinx culture. personally, I didn't learn that a part of my family was Cuban until like 5 years ago. But I had Puerto Rican friends, I had Dominican friends, so I grew up, alongside the culture and the music and all that stuff, and would experience the discrimination that my friends would experience, like right alongside with them, because I present a certain way. And I was just kind of like, wait, well, this is foolish, first of all, like point blank period, this is dumb, right? But where does this come from? And it led me to do some research and do some homework on that, but I hadn't been able to define it in such a way that you had, Aliza. So once again, I do appreciate that. Because there's such a nuanced intersection in this part of the diaspora, representation in science fiction, fantasy, and horror is that much more important, particularly because seeing melanated people, marginalized people in things like Star Trek, in things like Star Wars, in things like Battlestar Galactica, or whatever the case may be, it's like, oh snap, we made it. Like, regardless of what else has happened to us, us presently and as we exist right now, whatever happened to our ancestors, whatever could happen to us tomorrow, seeing Dr. Culber on Discovery, seeing Michael Burnham on Discovery, seeing all of these people shows us that no matter what we're going through now, we make it. And I just wondered how much science fiction and thrillers and horror and that fantasy genre impacted you. At least I'm going to get back to you because I know you're a hardcore Trek girl. We're going to get into that. But Wilson, I was wondering, did any of these genres influence you coming up? Was it something that was just kind of on your radar peripherally, or were you a fan of quote unquote nerdy things as you were coming up in the industry?
Oh, I'm a nerd for sure. I'm not a nerd to the Anthony Rapp degree, but because I think that's like royalty nerd.
Interesting.
I'm not quite there. I'm in the court, maybe.
Okay. One of us.
Because he is the epitome. But anyway, so I was more of the Star Trek guy, right? Like, Next Gen was my Star Trek, and I knew of the history of Star Trek, obviously, because of Nichelle Nichols and that famous biracial kiss that they had with William Shatner. So I knew of the idealistic world that Star Trek was pointing towards. But I was also very aware of how it failed, in terms of giving Nichelle all of the glory and the flowers that she deserved at the time. I'm of the thought that we needed to see a lot more of Nichelle Nichols in that original series, and it would have made it better. And she wouldn't have even considered to have left if she had been given the opportunities that she deserved at the time. So I'm glad we're giving her flowers now because she deserves them. But it also failed in terms of LGBTQ representation for, so in terms of the regular cast for 52 years.
Yeah.
So, in terms of my relationship to it, it was looking forward to the day when that wrong was righted. I just wasn't aware that I was going to be a part of the solution. And I'm grateful and enjoying the process of righting the wrong. But I think what's valuable about science fiction and Star Trek specifically is it's very simple. We always hear throughout our childhood, if you can see it, you can be it. And I believe that. I believe we have to be able to visualize our evolution, our inclusion, our liberation in order to achieve it. And I think Star Trek, especially now, is a great tool to allow people to imagine that world. And I think it's valuable. And I think we won't even know the effects and ramifications of these characters and what they're allowing us to feel with them for another generation, because all over this country and the world, really, there are young people of color who are watching the show and seeing Michael Burnham and, Hugh Culber and all all of, David Ajala.
I'm about to say, and Awoshikun, and Book, and Bryce, and Disco's the greatest.
all of the non-white, straight, cisgendered characters that we have on our show, and allowing them to imagine themselves as a part of that idealistic future. I think that's our job. That's our charge.
I think you're doing it quite well. Aliza, you're a big old nerd about Trek in particular. Tell us a little bit. Yes, girl. Tell us a little bit about your experience growing up liking the genre and how it's influenced your decisions as an actor.
Oh goodness, yeah. So I think you've heard this story, Kennedy, about how I've been in LA for like 15-ish years, and for a long time there's two things that were happening with me. Number one is that when I moved here from New Jersey, from the East Coast, that has lots of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, darker skinned Latinos, where it's known that Latinos are all different colors. I moved here and my Latin side was invisible almost immediately. People did not perceive me as Latina at all. I'm half African American because one parent is African American and the other is Afro-Boricua. So I just kind of came here and I all of a sudden was only African American. And even then, I sometimes felt like I wasn't African American enough to book certain roles or to be like counted as you know exactly what I'm saying, Wilson. So that was my experience when I first moved here. And also another thing that was happening was that I felt like I was always trying to like fit myself into boxes instead of bringing myself to the role. I always worried about what are they looking for? What is the right way to do this character? What do they want to see? Instead of just saying, this is what I bring to it. And it made me feel really empty. And I was working a lot. I was like booking lots of commercials at one point. I was making good money. I had health insurance through SAG, but I felt really creatively unfulfilled. And so I decided, number one, I started to take improv, which changed my life.
It is a game changer. It is. It's a game changer.
Like I have a whole other career, next to acting because of my improv. And then the other thing I started to do was just like reconnect with my own interests, which was space and Star Trek. And so I started watching Star Trek chronologically from the beginning, just kind of completely immersed myself in Star Trek. And from there, I met awesome people. I was inspired and excited again. I started having ideas for scripts and stories. When I got to TNG and saw Guinan again as an adult, I was like, oh my God, we need a show about her. Like, where's her show? I started writing that show with a friend. Like, Star Trek and improv, that coalescence of me finally like tapping into what interests and inspired me was what creatively just broke me open. It was like the floodgates opened. And so I'm very thankful to Star Trek for that, for kind of giving me this like resurgence of creative juice and inspiration. And Guinan too. Guinan is very dear to my heart because of that representation, seeing Whoopi Goldberg on that screen in a thing that she
the best colors,
her own existence, wearing gorgeous colors, in
the best colors, just cheekbones popping all over the galaxy. It was
melanin just shining and gleaming, melanin.
Else was like, so radiant, like.
I mean, and she spoke that role into existence for herself too, like that. And so I was like, I'm going to start doing that too. And I like co-created the Improvised Generation, which is our improvised Star Trek show that's been running for 6 years, which is great.
And it's hilarious.
And it's now online because of the pandemic. And also originating the first Black and Afro-Latinx female captain character in Star Trek, although we're not canon. But yeah, I just was like, I'm going to start creating the roles that I want to see for myself and for my friends and like get our representation, even if it's just in our own little nerd bubble of improv and Star Trek fandom. Mm-hmm. But it's really like opened a lot of doors for me in terms of just showing who I am as an actor and being able to bring that into the room when I audition and when I get on set. So Star Trek is huge for me for that reason.
I just need to go back and just give you love because I understand that feeling of invisibility in Los Angeles because I was 9. So I knew of my pride in being Puerto Rican and I knew what it felt like to feel seen in New York City and from my people and to move to Los Angeles where I felt completely misunderstood. I mean, in junior high school and high school, people couldn't even point out where Puerto Rico was on a map. You know, they thought that when they were talking about Puerto Rico, they were talking about Portugal.
Oh my God!
The education system. So you know, so invisibility, that feeling of invisibility is very real, which is why it's been so gratifying to me to have the writers use Hugh and his past to, and I don't want to make any spoilers here, to let you guys know that Puerto Rico is still with us in 3188 or wherever we were. So you know, we talk about the fact that he hiked the cliffs of Cabo Rojo, and that he still cooks his mother's ropa vieja. And in season 4, we have even more references to it. So it's important for me to be sending this message out that Puerto Rico is still in existence, you know, on the United Earth.
Can I just say too, I want to give you back that love, and we see each other, and that is beautiful. And we have each other, all of us who are invisible. We are now, you know, stepping out and creating these spaces for ourselves. And you are someone who has inspired me. I'm tearing up. I just really want to
do it. Cry.
I also want to like personally say it means everything that you are an Afro-Latino identifying actor in Star Trek.
It really is like
it means everything.
A lot. When I told people that we were having this panel, people were like, "Oh, you get to talk to Space Poppy?" I was like, "I'm not calling him that." I was like, "I'm not calling him that." I said, "That is disrespectful." I
like it. I take it. I'm gonna have a T-shirt made, please.
Good, because you want a Space Poppy. Excellent. Let's talk about it. Because here's why, Wilson, you are the first Puerto Rican I've seen in space, and I say that because, as a sci-fi person, I've watched a lot of science fiction, right? And I exclude Agent Vasquez from Aliens because she was portrayed by a white person and also put in brownface, which is not cool, right? So I literally, when I put on Supernova, this is your 21st anniversary of that movie, by the way. I hate to put a date on it. Yeah, the year 2000. The year 2000! Oh I remember being in high school and being so thrilled that there was like a wave of science fiction, horror, action movies at that time, and thinking like, oh, cool, Angela Bassett, James Spader, let's go. And then I look in the first scene, I was like, that's my so-called boo! And I just remember thinking, hell yeah, Ricky made it. Like, I just remember seeing Ricky on My So-Called Life and being like, yes, come through representation, right? We out here on all the different levels. And then seeing you in Supernova was like, holy shit, he made it. Puerto Ricans made it to the future, and this Puerto Rican in particular made it too. So it was just like, all this love that gets poured on you, Wilson, please know that it comes from a very genuine place.
I receive it all. And I have to tell you, like, you know, that all of that is to Walter Hill, you know, who was someone I met, who I'd known for a few years. And he was like, he had taken over the project, and he was like, who looks like the future to me? And he thought, Wilson Cruz
you
looks like the future to me. And so he brought me on, and the fact that, you know, that it wasn't just me, it was Angela Bassett, it was Lou Diamond Phillips.
Yup.
You know, it was like, you know, we were in the house, we were there.
Mm-hmm.
The movie and the shooting of it itself is a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
Because literally, I think by the middle of the shooting of that film, we didn't know what we were making because there were new pages that came to us every morning. We were like,
okay. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
all I was concerned about was that I wasn't going to be the first one who died. That's all. I just want to make sure I wasn't the first one.
Right. Make sure that check don't bounce, and that I'm not the first one to get it.
I was the last one. I'm the last one to die.
Yeah, absolutely. So to that point, and to your point, Elise, I'm trying not to tear up on the heels of that as well. Someone reached out to me over the past couple of weeks about this panel. Jonathan Furman says, I'd have to think you, Wilson, has commented on this, but I'd love to hear his thoughts on going from playing someone like Ricky on My So-Called Life in the 90s to Hugh almost 30 years later. Again, why we gotta put dates and times on things? Like, what's that about? Yeah, it's valid. If I ever meet Wilson Cruz, I want to ask him where he thinks Ricky is now and what he'd think of Hugh.
You know, they're two completely different experiences. You know, Ricky Vasquez lived in the margins, right? He was, you know, intersectionality personified. So he was someone who didn't fit in anywhere, right? And was literally defining himself, was inventing himself in those 19 episodes. And I think playing Hugh Culber couldn't be more different, right? Here's someone who
is serving us body weekly on Star Trek. You could say it. You could say it. Just serving us body in their medical whites. I was like, come on, Wilson, come on.
I mean, I think the thing about Hugh Culber is that he is, you know, he's not thinking about the fact that he's gay. He's not thinking about that, you know, that he's thinking about how best he can use his lived experience to save the world, right? And his lived and unlived experiences to save the world, because he is a different person, right? Because of the trauma that he's experienced. And I think for me, playing Hugh is about how we as humans experience, survive, and sometimes grow from trauma, and then use that experience in order to reach a hand out to others who also experience trauma. For me, that's Hugh Culber's whole thing. It's empathy, it's compassion, and using his lived experience to save the world. So that's what I think. So I don't even think I think for Ricky Vasquez, you know, that feels like a miracle. You know what I mean? And as far as where he is now, I think he is living his entire best life, being one of the foremost fashion designers in all of fashion. I think he is, you know, he's a superstar of the fashion world. And and he, you know, he's dressing all of us right now. I think he's living his best gay life. He's a dad. Yes. You know.
Oh yeah, Ricky's a dad? I know that kid is probably fabulous.
I do. I also love that Hugh Culber has become this father, right? That he's able to now step up and with his partner and model this time-honored LGBTQ tradition of our chosen families, you know, of finding those who need us within our community and supporting them, and giving them the best opportunity to live up to their potential. I mean, that's true fatherhood. You know, a nod to all fathers today on Father's Day.
Yeah, and you can tell as well through your performance, because there's a moment, I believe towards the end of season 3, where it's where we can finally see Gray, and Hugh embraces it, and you can see that Hugh knows Gray being seen is a big deal, not only tangibly because of science reasons, right, but also culturally, right? You could just, if for somehow you've been living under a rock and have never seen, you know, a gay found family before, and that was your first experience, like, chefs.
Really, you know, when I say that line, I really am thinking about how I am this gay man of color, you know, speaking to this trans young person. And it's not lost on me that I am a member of the queer community saying to this trans person that I'm going to do everything in my power and ability to allow them to be seen and to be everything that they desire. And to me, it's about allyship, but, you know, it's about supporting our kids and our youth. And it's important for us to model that we, within the queer community, can also step up and be great allies.
Mm-hmm. That moment was so impactful. And
I get to talk about the fact, because Michelle talked about it, that we live up to that promise in season 4. So I want you guys to understand that we.
Oh, can I ask a question too about season 4? And I know you can't answer it, but I just want to get the. I saw you. You tweeted in response to somebody about the In the Heights backlash about colorism. You tweeted in response like something like "Stay tuned because there's going to be more representation in season 4." I
was talking about the fact that they were questioning whether or not.
Culver was Latino, right?
He was Puerto Rican, even. So that's what I was referencing. But
okay,
I do want to say a little about the In the Heights thing, if I may, and because I think it's important that there's a lot of us in the Afro-Latino community who watched that movie, and we're overwhelmed by seeing ourselves on screen and by seeing so many of us on screen at once. That I think it was easy to be blind to the fact that we weren't all there, and that the job that they really did need to do a better job of representing that community and that neighborhood in the way that it exists. And when this controversy began, my initial response was really about an article that came out that weekend from the LA Times, which talked about the fact that even though Latinos represent 20% of the population in the US, we only represent less than 5% of representation on TV and less than 5% in film. So when the controversy came out, my response was about how there's already a lack of representation. And the fact that we have such a lack of representation does not help the fact that fewer of us are being seen. And so my call was for more content created by a more diverse a group of us who are allowed to tell those stories. But it also, by saying that, sounds tone deaf to the fact that doesn't solve the problem within this movie. And as much as I personally enjoyed it, because I've been locked up in this apartment by myself in Toronto, Canada, and watching it was a salve to me. It was, I haven't seen my family in almost 2 years. So it was food for the starving over here. But that, the fact that I was so overwhelmed by it and my own response to it, I think, like many people, blinded me to the fact that we weren't all in the room. And I also wasn't aware, to be honest with you, that there had been a controversy before, about during the Broadway show where the concern was brought up to the creators at the time. And so you would think that they would have brought that concern and that knowledge in with them when they were producing the film. So, I want people to see the movie. I'm also invested in the fact that we need this film to succeed because I know how this industry works. And if this movie fails, it will literally be the first thing that anyone points to whenever we walk in the room with a story idea. But that doesn't mean that we can't do better when we get the opportunity.
Yeah. I think like the way that you just spoke about it is really great because I think the people who do feel represented in seeing In the Heights, I felt there was a lot of like anger towards Afro-Latinos and darker skinned people who were saying, hey, y'all, like, we need to do better. This movie, except no, like this is not what that community looks like. Where are the darker skinned Latinos who exist? I think the way to celebrate this movie is to actually hold it, just like say, like there's a better standard that we should be upholding. And honestly, we also can't move forward as Latinx filmmakers, content creators, TV creators, unless everyone comes with us. Because, bringing this back to Star Trek, there, I did a little deep dive list of all the Latino, Latina, and Latine characters in Star Trek. There's like a handful. There's several, maybe. Most of them were played by just straight up white people, not even Latino at all white people. And then the ones who were played, before Culber, of course, Culber is the exclusion to all of this. Before Culber, the ones who were played by Latinos were always played by the European descended, strong European features, the white Latinos. Right. And so in the same way, I just want my Latina brothers and sisters who are like more mixed or European descended, white descended people to have that empathy for us, because what has been happening to the mestizo Latinos this whole time has been happening 20-fold to the Black Latinos and Indigenous Latinos. So don't forget us in your struggles. We're part of your struggles too. And if you're okay with our erasure, then that means you're kind of okay with your own erasure. So just don't be about that. You can celebrate and support this movie, but also understand that we are in this together, and our erasure will result in your erasure all over again.
Right. So as we mentioned before, it's important to take an obstacle like this and turn it into an opportunity. You're getting people who are represented in these marginalized communities in the writer's room, doing cool things like leading their own games when it comes to RPGs and doing it on streaming platforms, so you don't have to worry about a network weighing in on one thing or another is amazing for you, Aliza. And for you, Wilson, your activism is definitely something that enables this to be true, but also your next project, Out of the Box. I wanted to give us a quick minute to talk about that before we break for the panel.
That's actually an old name for the documentary that I produced for Apple TV. So Out on the Box actually became visible out on TV, which is still on Apple TV, and it's a 5-part documentary about the history of LGBTQ images on television from the beginning to last year when it premiered.
Nice.
Excellent. Very cool. Well, thank you both so much for joining me. Thank you for your being candid. Thank you for your truth, for your honesty. I appreciate the both of you. I appreciate seeing the both of you. And just happy Juneteenth. Happy Liberation Day. Visibility for all.
Happy Juneteenth. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Mwah.